one thing, Michael, that you guys both focused on in the written outlook, which I found to be actually a really fascinating thing to do. I mean, usually these outlooks tend to be macro and markets oriented, but you wrote this separate segment on disruption, which I found fascinating, and I want to spend just a minute or two on today. And basically what you articulated is that, in any given industry, and that traditional industry has its traditional customers, something new and better and easier to do always seems to come along these days and win market share at the expense of others. And those old industries either sink or swim. They either adapt. There's going to be winners and losers. Can you share with our audience why the focus on disruption? You touched on it just briefly before when you mentioned labor juxtaposed against robots, and I'd also love your thoughts on if you think my job will get automated by a robot, because that's important to my wife and I. But just why is this such a theme in terms of our business's outlook for 2018? Why'd you put it in there?
Sure. I mean, first of all, it's no longer a micro phenomena. I mean, it's so prevalent that it's affecting our numbers. So even as economists, we look at inflation, and as I mentioned earlier, by now we should have seen more inflationary pressure. So we know that disruption has, to a large extent, to do with that kind of cap on wage growth and prices. But we also ought to recognize that the benign interpretation of low inflation, low rates, is sponsored by some profit margin compression in some parts of the S&P 500. There's no free lunch. The loss of purchasing power that gives us this benign interest rate environment, the flip side of it, comes from corporations that are being challenged. Think about the brick and mortars, the REITs, but even brands are going to feel the pressure going forward.